everyone on Facebook. We are back for another Facebook Live. It is Monday at just about 12:30. TGIM, thank God it's Monday. This is our second episode of Facebook Live. Last week was our first one, and we do this every week at 12:30, or we will be doing this every week at 12:30, and it's a chance for you to type in comments, type in questions, and it is a chance for us to be able to fulfill our mission, which is to help people suffering with chronic disease, chronic illness, or people that just aren't feeling well or feeling bad about themselves, whether they're overweight or whether they're in pain or whether they have digestive complaints or thyroid issues. We're here to be able to help people with our type of information. So last week was our first week that we did this, and we had over 5,000 views for that last week's episode. I was pretty amazed at that. 5,000 people checking in. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you whether you're tuning in right now or whether you watched it on a replay. But we're going to be able to reach a lot of people this way. So make sure that if you are watching or you have questions that you enter your information. Hey, Rolly's here. How you doing, Rolly? Check in, type in questions if you have them, or just sit back and enjoy. So today we're going to talk about gluten. So I titled this, "What's so bad about gluten?" You know, if you were an alien coming to this country and you walked into a grocery store, you'd see gluten-free this, gluten-free that, you'd feel like gluten was the enemy. And in some ways it is, but I want to be able to dispel some myths about it and to talk about what is bad about it. And, you know, some people view this as a fad, the next fad, getting rid of gluten, but there are some real issues with it. And I wanted to go over what they are and, you know, and why it's an issue. So first of all, what is gluten? Well, gluten is a molecule that obviously you'll find it in lots of different places. It's a molecule that causes some issues in certain people. There is a portion of that called the gliadin molecule that is able to be placed into a lot of different products. So obviously we're going to find gluten in bread and pasta and muffins and donuts and all these flour-based products you'll find gluten in, but there's also some surprising places where we'd find it. Medications is one of them. In fact, lots of medications have gluten in them. Lunch meat is kind of the glue that keeps lunch meat together is gluten. Even some toothpaste have gluten, so it's everywhere. If you have a processed product that you get out of a package, it's going to have gluten in it as well. And there's obvious sources too, even beer and things like that have gluten in it. But ironically, if you were going to drink some distilled liquor, gluten doesn't survive the distillation process. So you'd be able to have that. That's actually gluten-free, even if it was whiskey. So what is the problem with it? Why are we having a problem with it now? I mean, if we think back historically, gluten has been a staple in most religions. You know, hundreds of years ago, bread was really all that people ate. It was a big part of life. So why now? Why is there being a big issue with this now? Well, one of the causes of the problems is the fact that it's a hybridized product now, which means that it's not the same as it was hundreds of years ago. In fact, the gluten molecule now wheat itself right now looks very little like, if at all, like it used to hundreds of years ago. So scientists have been able to hybridize this plant so much that our bodies won't even recognize this anymore as regular wheat. So that's the first problem with it, is the fact it's hybridized. And it's brand new to our body. It's something our bodies aren't used to looking at. Second thing is that scientists have deaminated gluten. So when they, in a lab, are able to chemically change the product, we're able to have gluten be able to dissolve easier. So it can be put into things like lunch meat and things like toothpaste and be used kind of as a filler for a lot of different things. So when we deaminate it, we change the structure of it as well. So that's the second problem with it, which makes things unrecognizable to the body, which is a problem. The third thing that we have an issue with is the fact that it's a very highly sprayed crop here in the U.S. And they spray it with Roundup, which is glyphosate. Glyphosate is a very toxic product that I believe in the near future is going to be something that is going to be banned and won't even be able to be used. So those are three reasons why gluten is bad, and things, why our bodies in many cases are becoming sensitive to it. So I do have patients who come in and they'll say, and I take almost all my chronic disease patients off, or chronic health patients off of gluten. And many of them will look back and say, hey, I went to my doctor already. He checked me. I don't have celiac. I'm fine. I don't need to go off of gluten. And my answer to them is that when we test for celiac, we're only testing for 2 or 3 peptides of gluten, when there's well over 20 of them that need to be checked. So yeah, you may not have celiac disease. Approximately 1% of the population has celiac disease. So 1 in 100 have celiac. But it's been estimated that about 30% of our population is sensitive to gluten. So, you may not have celiac disease, but you still may have sensitivity to it, and I'll explain what that does later on. And of those 30% that are sensitive to gluten, 99% of those people are undiagnosed. They don't even know it. So I was one of those people who, I could eat a whole pizza right now and I won't have any symptoms from it, but I know I've had my blood tested. We run a full peptide gluten test to really determine if you're gluten sensitive, and I am. So I have a couple peptides that I'm sensitive to, and I'll, as we watch a little bit further on, you'll see what that does to me if I have it. And it's enough for me not to eat gluten, so I am gluten-free. I'm for the most part, I'm grain-free, totally. That's how I advocate eating. But today we're talking about gluten, not about other grains. We'll just talk about the bad guy. So what does it do to us? Well, first of all, if you do ingest gluten, and obviously you eat it, it's going to go into your intestines. So when you are ingesting gluten, again, the body might not recognize it, or doesn't really recognize it as it used to hundreds of years ago. So it's something called leaky gut. You may have heard of leaky gut or intestinal permeability. And what that is when the tight junctions, the cells of your intestines, are supposed to be tightly knit together. And only really small molecules are supposed to be able to get through those intestinal walls, or the spaces in between the walls. So when we eat gluten, first thing it does is it opens up some of those junctions and allows larger molecules to get through. And that's why it's called leaky gut. So in our intestines, we're only supposed to have certain things in the tube of our gut, and they're not supposed to be able to get out of that. And leaky gut is a situation that causes all sorts of different food particles, viruses, bacteria to be able to get out of that tube and to places where they're not supposed to be, which creates inflammation. And inflammation is the second point, the second reason why we want to give up gluten is because it creates inflammation. And inflammation has been shown to be the cause of almost all disease, or even early death. So if you have elevated cholesterol plus high inflammation, you're much more likely to have a heart attack. If you have elevated blood sugar plus high inflammation, you're much more likely to have problems as well. So if you add inflammation to anything else, it's going to cause things to be a lot worse. So inflammation is bad. And what happens with this is when your body doesn't recognize this molecule that comes into our gut, the immune system gets activated. It thinks of it as a bacteria or a virus or an invader, and the immune system comes in and attacks. And when it attacks, it also destroys the ground that it's attacking on, which is the gut as well, which further leads to that leaky gut as well. So when that inflammatory response happens, then we run into a problem. And that's also where people feel bloating, they feel digestive distress, they have bowel changes oftentimes with gluten. So that's part of the reason why. Now, if you have an autoimmune condition, then you really, whether you feel better or worse with gluten or not, you need to have step one is to be gluten-free. Because your immune system, again, is one of the things that is turned on you. It's become dysregulated. With autoimmunity, your immune system finds a tissue and begins to attack it. With gluten, that molecule looks a lot like thyroid tissue. So they call this molecular mimicry. And with a molecular mimicry, the body looks at gluten or whatever product it is, and if it looks similar to to tissue, let's say the thyroid, when you eat gluten, the immune system gets activated, it attacks the gluten, and also will attack the thyroid. So people will have a lot more problems with that. And it's not just thyroid, by the way. Rheumatoid arthritis is really well known with that as well, as is almost any autoimmune condition. So if you know you're autoimmune, you need to go off gluten. Step one, no excuses. I'm getting a message here that it's frozen. I don't know how that's happening, but I do know that we are without internet access here right now. I'm 3G because they're doing some work in this area. So hopefully this is still working, but I'm going to continue on as if it is. But really, thank you for letting me know it's frozen. Hopefully it's not frozen anymore. So the next one was autoimmune. So after that, so if you're autoimmune, you definitely want to go off of it. If you're a person who doesn't have any sensitivity to this, good, Carmine, thank you. If you're someone who doesn't have autoimmunity and you're still wondering, well, why, is there any reasons for me to go off of it? If I'm not autoimmune, I feel great, my life is good, I don't need to go off of this stuff. Well, there are a couple reasons. First reason would be for triglycerides. If you've ever had your blood tested and you see elevated triglycerides or elevated cholesterol and you're worried about that, well, triglycerides are not elevated from eating fats. You're supposed to eat fats. Fats are fine for us. Triglycerides are elevated when we eat grains and we eat sugar products. So when everyone knows sugar is bad, we don't have to talk about that. But if we talk about pasta and bread and muffins and those sorts of things, when that goes into our body uses that and views that just as sugar. And in your bloodstream, you're only supposed to have a certain small amount of sugar in there. Once that happens, the body has two places to put it. It can put the sugar into your liver and store it as glycogen. And once that's filled up, it'll store it in your skeletal muscles as glycogen as well. After that, there's no more room for this. And after those storage points, those two compartments are filled up, now we're going to have, if we still have too much sugar in our bloodstream, our body's going to take that and the liver will convert that into triglycerides. And it's going to stuff, it's almost like stuffing your luggage full of more clothes than you should bring. You have your friend come and step on it and push it in. Your body will begin to stuff glucose and triglycerides into different organs. So that's when we begin to have things like fatty liver. And it's not just the liver that gets fatty, other organs too. And why, diabetics end up having kidney issues and they have retinal issues because the body's trying to store that stuff away. So if you want to lower your triglycerides, go off of gluten and grains and sugar. That'll work for you. It's almost like magic. It'll only take a couple weeks for you to see those triglycerides plummet if you do that. The next thing, if you are a person who's not autoimmune and you're wondering why should I go off of gluten, well, is your weight. A lot of people come in here, one of the number one complaints, we have two of the most highly used symptoms here are weight and fatigue. So with weight, again, if you're eating too many carbohydrates, non-fibrous carbohydrates, I call them starchy carbs, you eat too many of those, you're gonna gain weight. And it's gonna create insulin, it's gonna cause insulin to be around the picture too much. And I like to think of insulin like a bouncer that won't allow fat to come out of your cells. So if insulin's around, the fat's not leaving. So you want to get rid of insulin, have insulin as low as you possibly can for as long a period as you can. And as you do that, then you'll lose weight and you'll feel better. So even if you don't have autoimmunity, you should go off of gluten and other grains for me, as well. So that is my take on gluten, why it is a bad guy. If you're not sensitive to it and you have it in moderation, I wish I could have a pizza. I wish I could have some of these things. I choose not to have them. They're delicious, but if it causes you to have health problems either right now or in the future, it's something that you should go off of. But if you're suffering with a chronic illness or a weight problem or anything about your health that's not good, that you're not liking, step one is always go off of gluten. Just do it. It's not that hard to do. And I would caution you against the gluten-free products too. So these gluten-free products, now it is kind of a buzzword in the food industry, so everyone wants to be gluten-free, but a lot of these products are garbage too. If you find a packaged product that's gluten-free, it's still going to have a whole lot of other garbage in there too. So you want to stay at the outer aisles of your supermarket, eat fresh food, cook your food, don't go out to eat all the time, and your health is important, it's worth it. So that is my talk for today. Next week, we'll probably talk about, we may go into weight problems, we may go into fatigue. I'm not quite sure what we're going to do. But this week, if you have questions about what we wrote about here today, then leave them in the comments box. If you like what you saw, then hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to our Facebook page, then subscribe to it. And if you know people that are suffering with certain conditions, share it. If you share it with other people, hopefully it'll make their lives better. I see lots of thumbs up now. Thank you. I hope that this is making a difference for you in your life. Each week we're going to talk about something that is hopefully going to help you feel better and live a healthier life. We'll talk about lots of different things, and each week I'll try to let you know what we'll be doing. So with that, I'm going to sign off, and hopefully that this didn't freeze and we went through the whole thing. So I appreciate you watching. Like it, share it, and I'll talk to you guys next week at 12:30. Bye-bye.